real critical rescues. They truly are the life and death type situations where if we're not there, somebody really might die.
Sea Watch arrives on the edge of the breakers, but the surf prevents them from getting any closer.
I thought he was for sure dead.
Spectators have begun to gather on the surrounding cliff tops, including the girl's concerned father. Lifeguards are responding to an urgent call of 2 young women stuck in Emerald Cove. Lifeguard John Kerr is first on scene.
I see a person on the face, 15, 20 feet up the cliff. So right away, I've got a situation.
Emerald Cove is a beautiful but dangerous inlet 200 yards north of Kerr's location. The Rocky Pocket Beach is surrounded on 3 sides by 100-foot cliffs, with water being the only way in or out.
So I paddled over there on the rescue board and I see 2 victims in the cove. One 15, 20 feet up the face of the cliff, which many have tried to scale, but no one's ever made it. So right away, I've got a situation.
Kerr discovers that the 2 victims are sisters. One is safely on the rocky beach, but the other is stuck in a dangerous spot.
One of the most dangerous things is, of course, her falling, her getting nervous, her getting fatigued and falling.
Rescue West arrives within 2 minutes.
I could only go into about 20 feet offshore before we're gonna hit the bottom. It's all reef bottom there.
Lifeguard Lance Mendoza paddles into the cove to back up Kerr. He finds one victim safe on the beach, but the other is in grave danger. Because of the lack of rainfall, the steep, rocky cliff face is prone to landslides, which could send rocks tumbling down on the victim.
She's right in that crevice, you see her?
Kerr continues to keep the victim calm, while lifeguard AJ Vila makes his descent. Spectators have begun to gather on the surrounding cliff tops, including the girl's concerned father. Vila must be incredibly careful. One misstep can cause a rain of rocks. Even the rescuer's rope brushing on the dry earth sends loose dirt down the cliff face.
IC dispatch update, rescuers at the victim.
She was a 15-year-old girl. She was pretty scared.
The first order of business is getting a helmet on the victim's head to protect her from falling rocks and debris.
Rescuer to ops, victim secure, ready to lower. Ops copies, lowering slowly.
Both victims are now safely on the beach, but lifeguards still need to get them off the dangerous rocks. Lifeguard Lance Mendoza paddles one sister to the rescue boat, leaving the other to Kerr.
The rocks are really slippery. She's a little fatigued, but I've got to get them from across the cobbles and into the water. And then once we're in the water, we're pretty comfortable and we're pretty safe.
We were gonna go and explore the caves, and so we tried to climb up some of the sand dunes, and I kind of got stuck.
As predicted, veteran lifeguard Gray Lang spots 2 teenage swimmers in distress near Tower 3.
I noticed 2 victims, so I entered the water up current from them. The reason being is that they're moving with the current, so as they're coming this way, I'm trying to cut them off.
As Lang enters the water, nearby lifeguard supervisor Jeff David backs him up at Tower 4.
We always try and backfill our towers, so we always have ice on the water.
The current gains strength as lifeguard Lang swims out. From his vantage point on the tower, David can see that the rip current is pushing Lang off course.
He got pushed up coast as well. He couldn't see them, and I was pointing directly to the victims that were down coast. And when he looked back at me, and then he saw where he needed to go.
When we're in the water, we can't get that view up and looking down and see everything. So the communication when we're in the water is huge. When I got to the victim, he had just come onto the hole where he could no longer touch the bottom.
Lang reaches the victim just as he submerges under a wave.
When I reached the victim, he took the buoy. I had to tell him to latch onto it really hard.
The victim is secure, but 20 yards to the south, the other is struggling.
The victims had separated a little bit, so I was on one and I looked to the other one and I noticed that my flanking tower guard had gone out as well. So I knew I could focus on the one victim that I had.
With the aid of the Tower 3 guard, both victims have been rescued.
They probably drifted maybe 150 yards within a matter of a couple minutes.
We try and educate people and keep them out of those areas, but you never know when they're gonna occur.
me and Matt decided to start digging a hole.
For 3 hours, the boys continued to dig. After reaching a depth of 7 feet, they began tunneling.
10 minutes later, I kind of got over it, and he kept digging, and we were just hanging out next to the hole. And we called him out, and hey, you know, Matt, come out, let's play football or something. And we looked down, and the tunnel was caved in. So we jumped down, and we heard screaming.
The tunnel caved in around Matt, and the hole filled. Within seconds, he was trapped in a 10,000-pound sand avalanche.
My brother and my cousin's boyfriend jumped down and started digging while I rushed and sprinted to the Lifeguard tower asking for shovels and help.
The Newport Lifeguard at Tower 52 sent out the Mayday call, Code 3.
When Matt's cousin told me that he was stuck in the sand, my training kind of took over. So I knew to call it in right away and then just run down and start digging, enlist people around to start helping out and dig until we could get more resources on the scene.
Newport Battalion 6 and responding units. Calling party advised a teenager was digging a 6-foot trench in the sand. They're trying to dig him out at this time.
Captain Brian O'Rourke was on a Newport Beach lifeguard boat when the call came in.
I heard that there's a possible sand collapse, somebody buried in the sand. So I jumped off the boat and swam in. I got right into the hole, and Matt's family members, they were screaming and they're going right about there. And we just started digging, trying to just get some sand. Hopefully we could find them within seconds.
Lifeguards and the rest of the fire department worked as a team to take control of the operation, while Matt's cousins watched helplessly from the sidelines.
It just didn't seem like they were digging deep enough and time was running out.
Units from all over the city respond in massive numbers.
62's on scene. We have multiple people digging in the sand.
Trapped without oxygen, the clock begins ticking on Matt Mina. Matt has between 4 and 6 minutes before the risk of serious brain damage.
The day that Matt was buried under the sand, I was what they call the incident commander, or the IC, in charge of the overall operation. So my job is essentially to show up and try and make some organization to the chaos that's already happening.
So this time we'll need additional manpower to assist with digging.
Word of the collapse spreads, sending the beach into a panic. And police are called for crowd control, while more search and rescue teams respond to the beach. Lifeguard Alex Skur arrives 12 minutes after the initial call.
When we arrived at the incident, there was quite a few people in a big circle surrounding the event.
Listen up! Get behind the emergency vehicle! Now!
Went and reported to the incident commander, and he told me to go find Captain O'Rourke and start digging.
Removing the sand posed an immense problem to the rescue effort. With every handful they scooped out, another slid back in. They had to dig outward before they continued downward. 15 minutes in, and Matt was still 4 feet underground.
Based on that, I had to start formulating a plan of what we were going to do and how many resources we were going to need to take care of that. I put one of the captains in charge of just the diggers inside of the hole.
I'm gonna ask everybody to take 5 steps back.
And I had another captain in charge of the perimeter.
Rescue workers teamed with bystanders to create concentric circles of diggers around the point last seen. But even with all the manpower and organization, progress was painfully slow.
After the first 20 minutes when the fire department was digging, I couldn't comprehend it, but I thought he was for sure dead.
Hey, you guys gotta jump back to where the sand's wide.
A lot of chaos going on, a lot of people panicking, and then we had more resources come in. We just kept digging and digging, but it was frustrating because every time we made a lot of progress digging the hole, it just kept caving in around us. In the back of your mind, it didn't seem like there was gonna be a good outcome in the situation.
Keeping the sand out of the hole proved to be a massive undertaking. Rescuers were forced to widen the opening by 20 feet across, or risk a chance of a second collapse. This extra step took time, something Matt did not have.
In our business, we have what we call an incident clock, and our dispatch center will tell us when we've been on scene for 15 minutes. So in this case, and that starts triggering more alarms in our head. Everybody knows that the human brain can only sustain about 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen.
It had been 20 minutes since the sand collapsed on Matt. the crowd of spectators continued to grow.
And I was starting to become very concerned that this operation was going on for so long that Matt wasn't alive down there. And then I have to start then taking a look at what we're going to do with all these people that are on the beach, all these rescuers that are in the hole, the news helicopters above us. It was just this humongous operation with hundreds of people watching. And if we pull this teenager out that isn't alive, now there's the psychological trauma of everybody else that happens to be at the beach that day.
25 minutes in, people began preparing for the worst, but lifeguards in the hole continued their frantic digging.
I was exhausted, digging sand that weighs, you know, it was so heavy digging out, but it was also like an adrenaline that you don't feel every day.
None of us, nobody on that beach was, you know, giving up until we found them.
These firefighters and these lifeguards and even the citizens, I couldn't have pulled them out of that hole with a taser gun. They were in there and they were going to stay in there.
And for over 30 minutes, rescuers worked at a feverish pace before seeing any sign of Matt.
I remember pretty vividly right when I saw his head and the paleness of his face that I didn't think he was alive.
Back up if you're not a firefighter or lifeguard. Back up. Didn't hear if he was breathing or not, or out of all the screaming and the crowd, my head just went deaf.
Guys, start backing up. Let's go. Back up.
The first time I saw his face, he was just unconscious. And he just sandy, pale.
Easy, guys. Easy. Whoa, 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 whoa. Relax, relax.
That's when I heard him like breathe, or like he's breathing. And then all of a sudden I heard him groan and I'm like, wow, he's gonna actually make it. And there was just cheers from hundreds of people on the beach.
Matt Mina had been lying unconscious under 7 feet of sand for nearly 35 minutes before rescue workers unearthed him.
Matt, for all intents and purposes, and I don't want to be overly blunt, but Matt should not have survived that. 7 feet down, all that weight, all that pressure, and lack of oxygen for over 30 minutes, that's unsustainable for human life. For me personally, in 17 years in the fire business, this is definitely one of the most miraculous rescues I've ever come across.
Rescue boat personnel are deployed in teams of 2. The operator is responsible for getting the boat quickly and safely on scene. He must get as close to danger as possible without putting the vessel in jeopardy. The deckhand goes into the water to help victims back to the boat. He must be a strong swimmer and an even better decision maker. It doesn't take long for the rip currents to strike.
Dispatch to 32 swimmers outside Tower 3 right.
Boat operator Ryan Gates heads to the scene.
Driving a 30-foot rescue boat inside the surf line is definitely risky. We're constantly looking over our shoulders at the waves that are breaking towards our bow. But if we're broadside or turned a little bit and we take a decent-sized wave, there's probably going to be a lot of damage. I don't ever want to think of that boat rolling.
This time, Kelso and Curry respond.
When we got the call to the outside rescue, Matt and I decided let's do a speed drop. So I climbed to the back of the boat and waited for his hand signal.
A high-speed drop will put a lifeguard within 5 yards of a victim, but it's not for the faint of heart.
Matt did it perfectly. Before the wake was gone, the victim's sitting right there.
As predicted, today is turning out to be a busy one for Surfwatch.
15 standby, 2 bogey in a hole, and 13 second guard in.
From the boat, we have a completely different vantage point, so we can see a lot of stuff develop before possibly the tower guards see it. The boats are vital in what we do as lifeguards.
But the biggest call of the day is still to come.
Requesting a rescue boat. We're having lots of rescues at the moment.
I received a radio call that there were approximately 4 tower lifeguards responding to several rescues in the area. When we arrived, we saw 5 to 6 people in a rip current being sucked out to sea. I just saw people spreading out quickly. They couldn't swim, and it just seemed to be getting worse.
These 2 guys were just barely getting breaths of air between the head coming up and down. I just grabbed a ring buoy and threw it for the two people struggling the most. They're basically drowning, and when they're drowning, they'll grab whatever is in their hands. And this guy just decides to grab on me and use me as his buoy.
At this point, I'm looking around, making sure everybody's safe, and they're not. I saw two other people in a rip, so I grabbed the second ring buoy and threw it off to another victim. Time was of the essence. If I can't bring people aboard quickly, we risk injuring the victims if we get caught broadside in the surf.
Just stay there, I'm gonna pick you up, okay? Everything, you'll be okay.
I got as close as I could, put the boat into neutral, and started assisting the other people. There were 3 victims. I was able to get 2 on board, and I just noticed the boat was sideways to the surf.
To make matters worse, another swimmer's been caught in a rip and is drifting out to sea.
It was just a matter of time before he was going to submerge. All the victims were spread out, and there was only 1 deckhand and 1 boat operator. I really thought that we were going to have at least 2 or 3 drownings on that particular rescue.
1930, requesting tower guard assistance outside 3.
Tower guards from the beach are trained to get in the water and assist the boat if needed. Lifeguard Michael Fales is the first tower guard in the water.
I responded to help back up the boat, and by the time I got out there, there's another group of little kids getting pulled out. So rescue can develop and become larger as the rips become stronger.
With Lifeguard Fales in the water, the crew works to corral the victims. But in these conditions, no one will be safe until everyone is on the boat.
Once I got the 3rd victim on board, I repositioned the boat, backed in, grabbed my deckhand and his 2 victims. We assessed the scene and moved down and grabbed 2 other victims. We gathered up as many tower guards as we could. Once everybody was safe, we moved to a location where there wasn't a rip current and I could get them close to shore. And at that point, we dropped everybody off and they were assisted by the tower guards into shore.
If the boat wasn't there, we would have had a different story completely. We would have been looking for bodies probably.
When lifeguards arrive on scene, they discover that it's not a single person, but 3 people trapped by the rising river. Lifeguards must race to extract them, as the island will soon be underwater, and they are just upstream from a very hazardous dam.
If things go bad, there's an end of the line for us, and that's the Lowhead Dam. The one in Long Beach here is bank to bank. It's, almost 600 feet wide. They call them drowning machines, and they call them that for a reason.
As the river flows over the Lowhead Dam, it hits the water below, creating backwash and a deadly spin cycle. Extracting the men from the island will require the Long Beach Fire Department lifeguards to perform what is known as a swift water rescue, a procedure that can be treacherous and extremely unpredictable.
The swift water is absolutely dangerous, especially in these concrete canals and the rivers like we have here. They're not made for recreation. There's lots of obstructions, there's lots of things to hang you up, there's lots of things that will kill you in the river.
With time working against them, Marine Safety Officers Tyler Warzinski and Patrick Morrison approach the river's edge.
And we need to worry about how we're going to get out of the river if things go south.
And as they step in, it's the unseen forces below the surface that test them the most.
The water was rushing pretty fast. The pressure on our legs was so much that I was behind Tyler at this point, and I had to push him to keep him from falling down.
Cautiously navigating through the water, the lifeguards must now execute a precise maneuver, floating down the river to the victims.
You're talking maybe a 2 foot wide by 7 foot long strip of dry ground that these guys were huddled on.
In addition to a small target, the lifeguards must also avoid any obstructions.
If you become pinned up against something, just the pressure of that moving water against your body exerts hundreds of pounds of pressure. So you can struggle all you want, fight against it, you will not win. The water will always defeat you.
Now they must hurry to extricate the men before the island is gone, and they are washed downstream into a deadly Lowhead Dam.
Water was rising. It was rising enough to where that island wasn't going to be there in the next hour.
The lifeguards begin their journey back to shore.
Along the way, making this rescue, the patient was nervous. He kept saying he was scared and he was tired.
Getting into swift water with the patient changes the ballgame. That patient could panic. They could start to become combative, want you to let go of them. There's a whole lot of things. So positioning that patient so they can't get at you, yet you can still rescue them, that's the key.
The first man is safely back on shore, but the river is rising quicker than expected. The lifeguards must make this next trip their final one. They add Marine Safety Officer James Reinheimer to help extract the men before they succumb to the water or the cold.
Hypothermia can set in quickly. The water is going to be really cold, and they could have been wet for hours before they got into this situation. So they could be well deep into a hypothermic state.
The team's back out on the sandbar. It looks to be almost completely submerged.
The 3 lifeguards and 2 victims assemble a line for the final critical leg of the rescue.
Dispatch, all parties on return to shore.
Once you put your hands on them, they're yours. Okay, they're your responsibility, and you've got to get them to safety. You got to try everything in your ability to get them to safety.
With Marine Safety Officer Warzinski leading the way, the lifeguards battle through seagrass, slippery rocks, and hundreds of pounds of water pressure.
You have your biggest guy in the front. He's taking the brunt of the force of the water and leaning into it. So what we did is to put a victim in between each one of us. In the event we did fall down, each person would have a hold of a victim. We can get them over to shore.
If they went south, they would go south quickly. 1 second we would be walking, and the next second we'd be in the water. If he gets swept under and loses his footing, now that victim is taking the brunt of the force, and we're all going to be swimming.
All right, they are 15 feet away. 10 feet. 5. Rescue 9 and dispatch, we're clear. Everyone's out of the water.
It's the best feeling to help save a life. It's what keeps people like me in jobs like this.
Rescue 9 have been released from the incident.
Today, the lifeguards of the Long Beach Fire Department were successful. While the weather can be unpredictable, they've proven they are prepared for anything. Several minutes after entering the water, the pair of spearfishermen surface near an outcropping of jagged rocks. Lifeguard Rice notices a rip current has pinned one of the men against the reef. He reacts quickly. Rice rides the rip current out toward the victim and is immediately sucked into the whitewash. The man continues to struggle, but the rip is too strong. Rice signals the other victim to swim to shore. The victim tries to follow his friend, but he's trapped in the surf. Rice knows there is only one way back to the shore. Now, they must ride the rip current back out and through the rocks. One victim is now free of the rip. Rice leads the other around flat rock. If a large wave breaks now, they will be dashed against the reef.
I initially went out on those 2 spear fishermen, and the one guy lost a spear, and then they got caught outside a flat rock here. I just went out and rescued him. I'm glad he came out and got us.
He was kind of in the inside. He started to swim, which actually, hindered him from getting in, because once he left his feet, he was getting sucked out.
The backwash rolls the victim in waist-deep water, keeping him off his feet.
Hey, go! Go!
I really didn't have time to think. Here at the Wedge, these rescues and things that happen here happen really fast. And if you don't really know what's going on, it can get disastrous really quick.
The victim is being dragged out toward the impact zone. As Butler approaches, a local body surfer swims over to help.
A lot of water was moving around, so he was getting sucked back into that larger peak.
5343, outside rescues at Wedge.
A Newport Beach rescue boat hears the call and responds from inside the harbor. Piloting the boat is veteran lifeguard Chip Going.
The rescues that we do go on,
They're generally the real critical rescues. They truly are the life and death type situations where if we're not there, somebody really might die.
Meanwhile, Butler and the victim are being sucked in the backwash. They're stuck in only 8 feet of water, and the immense surf is threatening to slam them on the bottom.
I got to him and got him away from the peak as fast as I could.
Sea-Watch arrives on the edge of the breakers, but the surf prevents them from getting any closer. 50 yards away from the boat, Butler finds himself staring up at the 18-foot wave.
But once you have someone else's lives in your hand and you have another person on your buoy and you're going up bigger waves like that, it does get, a little more challenging because you're pulling a lot of weight.
Just swim off the boat, take it back in.
Forward! Hold on, Matt, grab the buoy, go!
He was actually fine. We only let experienced people in the water, but even those experienced people do sometimes get into trouble. So he was fine. He was a little flustered after it, of course. He was in a spot that he didn't think he was going to be in when he got in the water, but he did fine. People do die on days like that, and it can be extremely dangerous here at the Wedge.